It's terrible that after 50 years it is behind closed doors. And I've no intention. Now I've started to stop now. I'm determined to put an end to this. Terrible.
The moment did not arrive with shouting. It came with silence, a sealed folder, and a king who had already made up his mind. Inside Windsor, Charles confirmed the decision that left Camilla cornered. She would have no governing role in Windsor Castle's future, no authority over its private apartments, family access, restoration priorities, or long-term royal use. And the room understood instantly, this was not administration. This was exile by protocol. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles kept his eyes on the page as the confirmation note was placed before him. Windsor Castle, the royal residence used as both family home and national symbol, had become the heart of a decision too heavy for polite language. The restricted royal household framework, a controlled system deciding who can approve access, repairs, rooms, and ceremonial use, would now sit under the monarch's office. William would hold direct consultative authority, meaning the prince would help guide residence, ceremonies, preservation, and the future shape of Windsor itself. Camilla heard every word. Whoever controlled Windsor controlled memory, inheritance, and the emotional map of the next reign. Camilla did not interrupt. She sat opposite the king while the wording was read aloud, and something in her face tightened when the truth settled in. This was not temporary. This was not symbolic. This was not a warning designed to frighten her into obedience. The queen consort had been removed from influence over private apartments, guest approvals, symbolic rooms, restoration priorities, and future access. Charles did not soften the blow. He signed the note, set the pen down, and left silence to do what anger could not. She saw the choice. The crown had come first. Her comfort had come second. A senior aide moved before anyone could speak. He lifted a second folder from the table and carried it away before Camilla could read the name printed on its cover. The motion was calm, invisible, but it changed the air. Charles noticed it. She noticed that he noticed. Windsor was only the visible door. Something larger sat behind it. William's name appeared again in the decision language, not as a son being informed, but as the future king being positioned. The prince had become part of the solution before Camilla knew the full problem. She rose, holding herself steady with pride. At the door, she turned back to Charles and asked one question no one dared to answer. Was this his decision alone? Before she could discover who had shaped Windsor, the palace had to face the lives tied to it. A royal decision is never just a document. It is a wound passed from hand to hand, from one locked room to another, until every person inside the family feels the cut. Charles carried duty like a burden. Camilla carried humiliation like fire. William carried the future like armor. And Catherine, watching from the edge of the storm, understood what others refused to say. Windsor was no longer just a castle. Charles saw Windsor as the emotional and constitutional heart of the monarchy, where family memory and public duty met. Constitutional, in plain terms, meant anything tied to how the crown works, how power is passed on, and how the public sees the royal system. The king knew why the decision mattered. If Windsor became a battlefield of loyalties, then the next reign would inherit confusion before it inherited strength. Camilla knew it too. That was why the loss burned. She had entered the institution after years of judgment, only to feel her voice narrowing inside its sacred walls. William believed protection had to begin before crisis. The prince looked at Windsor and saw the future of the Wales children, the promise of continuity, and the image of a monarchy that could not afford another feud spilling into public view. Catherine felt that pressure before he said a word. When he returned from the briefing, he paused near the door, wearing the room's weight on his face. She asked nothing at first. He gave nothing at first. But she saw the heaviness in his eyes, and he knew she understood. Camilla's humiliation had started before the world even heard a whisper. She walked into the meeting expecting reassurance, expecting Charles to explain how her position would be protected. Instead, the king had already accepted final wording she had never seen. Final wording meant the exact language of the decision, the part no one could soften once signed. Camilla heard the boundary inside every sentence. She was still queen consort, but Windsor would no longer bend around her presence. A note made the silence more dangerous. In the household file, William had warned Charles that Windsor could not become another battleground, and that warning had entered the decision trail. The prince had not shouted. He had not made a public move. He had simply written what others feared to say. Catherine never needed to appear in the file for Camilla to feel her there. The queen consort began to suspect that quiet influence had carried more force than any official title, and that suspicion would lead everyone back to the private incident at Windsor that turned a tense household debate into a point of no return. The palace would later pretend this began with planning papers and long-term strategy. It did not. It began on one bitter evening at Windsor, behind a closed drawing room door, when a single conversation became the trigger no one could undo. A guest list was questioned. A private room was challenged. A child's future was mentioned too sharply. And from that night forward, Charles knew Windsor had become dangerous ground. Camilla had entered that room believing she was defending her place. The Windsor Chapel reception dispute, a private argument over seating, access, and family order around a chapel service, became the spark that changed everything. A chapel service, in simple terms, is a formal royal gathering for prayer and ceremony, often tied to family duty as much as faith. This one mattered because it touched the Wales children's future roles, the careful public image of unity, and the question of who had power inside Windsor before the next reign arrived. William stood his ground with a stillness that made the room colder. Camilla challenged why the prince had final say over which relatives could use certain rooms before and after the service, arguing that Charles had given his son too much control. He did not shout. That made it worse. The future king told her Windsor belonged to the continuity of the crown, not to anyone's personal circle. Camilla heard the rebuke clearly, and the queen consort understood he was not just defending a seating plan. He was defending the future from her influence. Catherine stayed calm until the conversation turned toward Princess Charlotte. The Princess of Wales had listened carefully, measuring every word. But when her daughter's future was mentioned too sharply, something in her expression changed. William saw it. Charles saw it. Camilla saw it too. And for one dangerous second, the room stopped being about protocol and became about family blood, maternal fear, and the line no one should have crossed. Catherine did not need to raise her voice. Her silence carried enough force. Charles heard the full account later through a documented household note prepared by an aide who had witnessed the exchange. The aide had recorded it because the argument touched future residency, ceremonial access, and the children's place in Windsor's long-term role. That mattered. Residency meant who could live in or use royal spaces. Ceremonial access meant who appeared where during formal family moments. Together, those details were not small. They shaped how the next reign would look before it officially began. That file became the private foundation beneath the king's final decision. Windsor was not taken from Camilla in a sudden act of anger. It was closed to her piece by piece, after one evening revealed how far the tension had gone. When the queen consort learned that the old confrontation had followed her into the present, humiliation hardened into betrayal. She demanded a face-to-face meeting with Charles. The past had now returned as evidence, and Camilla was ready to confront the king, not as a queen consort, but as a wife who felt betrayed. There are confrontations that shake a palace because voices rise. This one shook because Charles refused to rise with them. Camilla entered believing she could still force an explanation, still find the weakness in his decision, still turn a signed order into a marital argument. But Charles stayed seated, hands folded, eyes tired and immovable. And for the first time, she saw that emotion would not reopen Windsor's doors. Camilla stood before him as a wife first and a queen second. The small sitting room carried none of the grand distance of a formal audience, which simply means an official meeting where royal rank controls every gesture and word. This was different. No aides waited near the walls. No private secretary softened the language. She wanted to know why Windsor, a residence so closely tied to royal identity, had been placed beyond her reach. Charles knew why the question hurt. Windsor mattered because it was not just where the family gathered. It was where the country imagined the crown continuing. Charles answered slowly, and each calm word made Camilla more furious. He told her Windsor's future had to be protected from household tension, personal alliances, and informal pressure. Informal pressure meant influence that came through private access, emotional closeness, and repeated presence rather than written authority. The king understood how cruel that sounded inside a marriage, but he also knew why it mattered. If private feelings shaped public succession, then the monarchy would look weak before the next reign even began. Camilla struck where she knew he would feel it. She accused him of allowing William to push her aside, and Charles flinched because the accusation hit two wounds at once. It questioned his marriage. It questioned his reign. The prince's name did not simply hang in the room, it cut through it. Camilla saw the movement in the king's face and pressed harder, asking whether his son had now become the person he trusted more than the woman beside him. Charles did not defend himself with anger. He told her love could not be allowed to shape the machinery of succession. Succession, in plain terms, is the line that decides who carries the crown after the monarch. Camilla's eyes filled first with fury, then with something more dangerous: hurt. The queen consort heard the sentence as a verdict. She was loved, but she was not trusted with Windsor. Charles then revealed, through a documented household summary placed before him earlier that week, that concerns had come from more than one senior channel. William had not stood alone. That truth changed Camilla's face. She asked whether Catherine had supported the restriction, and the king refused to answer directly. His silence did the damage. Camilla moved a chair slightly as she left, a small act of controlled rage. Charles did not call her back. The household was beginning to divide, and the real power behind Windsor was buried in machinery she could no longer control. Behind every royal heartbreak stands a system that does not cry. It records, files, reviews, and decides. While Camilla fought the decision as a personal betrayal, the household treated Windsor as a risk map. Doors were categorized, rooms were assigned, future access was narrowed. And in the center of it all sat one exhausted private secretary, watching faces change as power moved quietly away from the queen consort. The private secretary saw the truth before anyone said it aloud. A private secretary is the senior aide who manages official papers, royal decisions, and the flow of information around a working royal. This man had watched many difficult files cross the table, but this one carried a different weight because Windsor touched family life, succession planning, security, and public trust all at once. Succession planning meant preparing for the next monarch before the current reign ended. If that planning looked confused, the crown itself would look fragile. Camilla read the revised access framework with controlled stillness. The framework, in simple terms, was a list of rules deciding who could approve rooms, visits, ceremonies, and private use inside Windsor. Her hand paused when she reached the page where her name should have appeared. It was not there. The queen consort did not need anyone to explain the insult. A missing name can shout louder than a spoken warning. She understood that the household had not only reduced her influence, it had learned how to move without her. William felt no triumph when the file strengthened his consultative role. The prince stood alone before entering the meeting, choosing his words with care, because every sentence from him could be turned into proof of ambition. Consultative role meant he would advise on Windsor's future without replacing the king's authority. That mattered because the household wanted clear continuity before uncertainty could harden into crisis. He represented the next reign, the Wales children, and a public image of stability that could not afford another private feud. A confidential recommendation sat near the center of the file. It warned that no spouse of a reigning monarch should hold informal influence over Windsor's future private use without direct sovereign approval. Sovereign approval meant the monarch's clear permission, not quiet access or emotional persuasion. The line was cold, almost brutal, but it revealed the palace's fear. Camilla's presence had become a question of control. Catherine's role remained unofficial, yet her influence pressed quietly against the edges of every page. She had not needed to demand anything. Her concern for the children's stability had reinforced William's position without turning her into the face of the decision. That made Camilla more unsettled, not less. Power she could see was easier to fight than concern she could only feel. The new access instructions moved through the household with dangerous speed. One member of Camilla's circle read them, reacted sharply, and refused to accept what the page made clear. Once the palace machinery moved from private decision to practical enforcement, the humiliation Camilla feared became impossible to hide. The first consequence did not arrive in a speech. It arrived at a door. Camilla came to Windsor expecting habit to protect her, expecting old rhythms to continue, expecting staff to understand what no paper could erase. But the aide at the threshold did not step aside. He lowered his voice. He repeated the new instruction, and in that frozen second, the decision became real. Camilla's staff had tried to arrange access to a private Windsor apartment, once used for informal planning and family hosting. A private apartment, in plain terms, is a set of rooms used away from public ceremony, where family conversations and quiet decisions often happen without official display. That mattered because these rooms were never just rooms. They were where influence breathed. They were where invitations formed, where loyalties settled, where a person could shape the mood of the household without leaving a signature behind. Camilla arrived expecting discretion. The queen consort believed the aide would understand that rank still carried weight, even when paperwork had changed. Instead, he hesitated at the doorway, and that hesitation struck before his words did. He explained that all access now required approval through Charles's office. The king's office meant the monarch's direct working team, the people who controlled official permission around his decisions. Camilla heard the meaning underneath. Staff had been prepared before she had been emotionally prepared. The palace had accepted the new reality faster than she had. The restriction proved the Windsor decision was not symbolic. It changed daily movement. It changed private influence. It changed the way the royal household breathed around her. Camilla could still wear the title, still enter grand rooms, still stand beside Charles when duty demanded it. But the quiet doors, the useful doors, the doors where power moved without witnesses, now answered to someone else. The queen consort did not raise her voice. She simply looked at the aide long enough for him to feel the weight of what he had been ordered to do. Charles received the incident report later and sat with it in silence. An incident report, simply put, is a written account of what happened, prepared so the household has a record. The king felt the cruelty of enforcement, and that cruelty saddened him. He knew Camilla would see the moment as public shame, even if only a few people had witnessed it. Still, he did not reverse the order. Windsor had to remain protected, or every painful decision before this would collapse into weakness. A quiet message reached William soon after. Camilla's closest supporters were calling the move a calculated humiliation, and the prince understood the danger at once. Private resentment could become public poison if handled badly. Then one aide warned Charles that if the queen consort contested the framework, the palace might be forced to document the Windsor Chapel reception dispute more formally. That warning changed everything. The boundary had been enforced, but the emotional price still waited behind one final closed door, where father and son would have to face what Windsor had cost them both. After the confrontation, after the files, after the first door refused to open, Charles and William met without secretaries, without legal language, without the palace between them. It was no longer about clauses or access routes. It was about a father looking at his son and understanding that the future had begun to make demands the present could barely survive. Windsor forced them to speak plainly. Charles invited William into a private room at Windsor, not for another briefing, but for the conversation both men had avoided. A briefing, in simple terms, is an official update where aides explain decisions and risks. This was not that. The king wanted no prepared lines, no controlled notes, no polished phrases. Windsor mattered because it held family memory and the monarchy's future in the same grip. If the decision failed, it would embarrass Charles and hand William a broken inheritance. William stood before his father with restraint, but not distance. The prince told him Windsor had to feel safe and stable for the next generation, especially for Catherine and the children. That mattered because uncertainty inside the family becomes weakness outside it, and weakness around the crown becomes a story the public never forgets. Charles listened without interrupting. He heard the warning beneath his son's words. The future king was not asking for power. He was asking for protection before damage became permanent. Charles admitted what he had not said in larger rooms. Limiting Camilla's influence had wounded his marriage. The king said it quietly, and William's anger softened because he saw the pain behind the order. His father was not acting coldly. He was acting with sorrow because duty demanded private sacrifice. The prince understood that Charles had not chosen against Camilla with ease. He had chosen Windsor with a cost. William answered with care. He said he had never wanted Camilla humiliated, only contained where the monarchy's future was concerned. Contained meant limited to clear boundaries, not destroyed, not stripped of dignity, not pushed into public ruin. Charles heard the difference, and for the first time, the room did not feel like father and son standing on opposite sides. It felt like two men holding the same burden from different ends. Charles then revealed, through a documented private account prepared after the chapel reception dispute, that he had considered delaying the decision. But the old confrontation convinced him delay would invite something worse. William agreed to support the decision publicly through silence, refusing to brief against Camilla and choosing discipline over victory. With father and son aligned, pain became public meaning, and outside Windsor's walls, the country was about to decide what it believed had truly happened. By dawn, the palace silence had become a national roar. The story moved from corridors to front pages, from whispers to breakfast television, from private humiliation to public verdict. Windsor Castle stood unchanged in the morning light, but everything around it had shifted. People gathered at the gates. Cameras waited, and one headline captured the feeling with brutal simplicity. Camilla had been cornered. Charles allowed the statement to go out with his name behind it. The palace statement, in simple terms, was the official message released to explain a royal decision without exposing every private wound behind it. It confirmed a revised Windsor stewardship framework, meaning a new system for who would guide the castle's rooms, access, repairs, ceremonies, and future family use. The king wanted the public to hear words like continuity, preservation, and next generation. He understood why those words mattered. They made the move sound like stability, not punishment. Camilla watched the coverage from a private room and held herself still. The queen consort had not lost her title, and that fact made the humiliation stranger, sharper, harder to fight. She remained beside Charles in rank, but outside Windsor's most powerful future decisions. Commentators spoke of her reduced role as if she were already absent from the room, and she heard every clean sentence as a quiet insult. The monarchy had not thrown her out. It had done something colder. It had narrowed the space around her. Catherine saw the story unfold in a different silence. A still image of Windsor appeared on television, and she turned the volume down before the children could hear too much. The Princess of Wales understood that the castle was not just stone and ceremony. It was tied to the Wales children's future, to family stability, and to the public picture of what the next reign would become. She did not celebrate Camilla's pain. She simply protected the room she was in. One front page defined the morning. A newspaper showed Windsor Castle beneath the headline, "The Future is William's," with a smaller line beneath it, "Queen Consort left outside key decisions." The image carried more force than any palace phrase. It told the country that William had moved closer to the center of power without making a speech, and Camilla had moved farther from it without losing a crown. A broadcaster sharpened the meaning live on air, calling the decision the clearest sign yet that Charles is preparing Windsor for the next reign. That single line turned a family decision into a national succession signal. Succession, plainly, means the order in which the crown passes from one monarch to the next. Public sympathy split at once. Some saw Camilla wounded. Others saw Charles choosing duty. The world had reacted. The palace had endured. And now only one question remained inside the family. What did this decision finally mean? In the end, Windsor did not destroy Camilla. It defined her limits. It did not crown William early. It confirmed his burden. It did not make Charles cruel. It revealed the loneliness of a king who had to wound someone close to protect something larger. The decision was not simply about rooms, doors, or future plans. It was about whether the monarchy could still choose discipline when emotion demanded surrender. Charles settled the Windsor question with a finality no one could mistake. Sovereign authority, in simple terms, meant the monarch's direct power to approve what happens inside royal spaces, and how those spaces serve the crown. The king had decided that Windsor's future would be shaped by that authority, by structured household control, and by William's role as the future king. Camilla's informal influence no longer stood at the center. That mattered because Windsor was not just a residence. It was the place where succession, public trust, family memory, and the Wales family's long-term place all met. Camilla sat alone after the last briefing ended. The queen consort was no longer raging. That was what made the moment heavier. Anger had given her something to hold. Silence gave her only the truth. She still had her title. She still had her position beside Charles. But Windsor's future would now move without her hand on it. The monarchy had presented the outcome as continuity, not punishment. Yet she knew how punishment could hide inside careful words. Charles felt the cost when he passed her closed door later. The king paused, hand near the handle, and for a moment, the whole decision seemed to gather in that small space between action and retreat. He could reopen the emotional argument. He could offer comfort. He could soften the wound. But he also knew that one weak gesture might make the entire Windsor decision look uncertain. So he walked on, carrying the loneliness of a monarch who had chosen duty over peace at home. William answered with silence. The prince did not celebrate, did not attack, and did not explain through any private interview or recorded conversation. His restraint became the only statement he needed. The future he wanted protected had finally been secured, but there was no victory in watching his father suffer, and Camilla shrink from the center of power. The final revelation was not hidden in another file. Everyone inside the palace understood it now. Windsor had tested whether Charles could separate marriage from monarchy. He had done it. Camilla's influence had reached its boundary. William had stepped unmistakably closer to kingship. Windsor had been reclaimed as the symbol of the monarchy's next chapter. There was no unresolved ending here. The future was decided, the personal cost was accepted, and the crown moved forward with colder clarity than before. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.